Here we have the way to calculate inflation using the CPI approach and the GDP deflator approach. Essentially, the equations are pretty much the same. It's a certain number over another minus 1 times 100. And essentially what's going on here is when we compare the two different numbers, it's the denominator and the numerator. Well, at the denominator, we have the quantities and price of the base year. So here, we're comparing the way to calculate inflation using the CPI approach versus the GDP deflator approach. They both have their advantages and disadvantages, but if you look at the actual way that they're calculated, they're pretty similar. Both of them have something in the numerator minus over something in the denominator, minus 1 over 100 times 100. And essentially, that number that's in the numerator is the one that has the current prices, the newer prices, the ones that may have had inflation, and the one of the denominator has the base year prices. That way, we're really just trying to strip away that inflation component. We're trying to just keep in mind by how much those things have gone up in price. So if you just think about the equation itself, what's written on the next slide, you can have a good idea of what's going on here and how each of them could be good. If you think about CPI, well, CPI deals with a basket of goods by a typical consumer. So this deals with inflation based on consumption, whereas here we're talking about GDP. So it deals with things dealing with production. So if you think, let's say that the price of softwood lumber triples, in that situation there, it's going to have a big impact on GDP and then on GDP deflator approach to calculating inflation. But in the CPI approach, I'm not sure softwood lumber is in there, nor would copper or any other raw materials would be included either. However, if we think about like oranges or bananas or anything that's imported, this can still be part of CPI because a typical consumer does not just buy Canadian products, but it's not part of the GDP deflator approach. So it gives you an idea of what things may influence one, what may influence the other, and how they can have some small divergence going on. But generally, they tend to move together. So CPI uses a fixed basket, whereas GDP deflator uses what's being produced. So CPI is based on what's consumed, whereas GDP deflator is based on what's produced. If we compare both of them over time, we could see that they pretty much move together. We have inflation using GDP deflator in blue and CPI in this fuchsia color. So generally they move together. They're not quite the same at all times. There's, like I said, because some of the goods are a little bit different, the actual inflation rate may be a little bit different, but overall they move together. So which one's better? It really depends what you're interested in. Either way are different ways of calculating by how much goods in general have inflated in prices from one year to the next. What kind of inflation are we undergoing? So both of them are important.